subscribing to my channel. And I love every one of you who have and are and do. But I particularly want to thank Donna. You're so sweet. I look forward to your comments all the time. It's so nice to feel that positive feedback. And Jody, I can't thank you enough for enjoying Penny's video. It must have hit the perfect chord with you that day and that length. She is a sweetheart though, and she gobbled up every bit of kibbles that you afforded her, so thank you. And Ryan, I know you said you couldn't donate much and you haven't really commented much or been active on the channel, but it doesn't matter, man. I deeply, deeply appreciate the gesture of you going out of your way to donate to the channel. I think it means so much. It's a sign of good faith. It's really, really meaningful and valuable to me, to my spirit, to my motivation, to my drive. All you guys. And Steven. It means so much that you can donate as much as you do to the channel. It was an unexpected surprise and greatly appreciated. But it wasn't just that, it was also your demeanor, your character, your correspondence. It's so pleasant, upbeat. And that's what the world needs, more pleasant positivity. God knows there's enough hatred in the world, so let's just leave all that at the door when you pop on this video, guys. When you come to my channel, I don't want to hate on anything or anybody or any ideas. Let's all just spend 20, 30, 40 minutes and be on the same wavelength of love, respect, appreciation, gratitude for being alive and being on this wild roller coaster of a ride called life. But you know what? When we can share just a semblance of meaning and happiness and goofs and gags, and if I can put a smile on your face at least once in every video, then I'll feel like I've done something worthwhile. And I hope you feel that way too when you give me feedback and you comment and you like and you just reflect any positivity I put out there, and it amplifies it 100-fold. And Steven and Sandy, I want to thank you guys. Even you, Sebastian, Eric. You guys, you donated last summer, but I still just want to reach back and thank you guys. It just means so much. So, if you can imagine how vast space is, you can see respect ourselves in our precarious situation. And then, once we are happy and proud to look in the mirror at who we are, and at the good we bring to the world, why don't we show the same respect to our neighbors, our family, our friends, and beyond that, to strangers? Alright, I'm getting off the topic of the sun, but I think it's important, and that's what this whole video lends itself to, is the perspective of our unity. Not to be all tree-hugging and hippie and hipsterish, but I think it's a profound sentiment that we are in this together. If we destroy our planet, we're all going out. If we protect it, and we nurture it, and we grow as a species, as individuals, we're all gonna reap the benefits. So, to that person that walks by you next time you're out, and they have a negative look, maybe a smug look of disdain for you just because they're in a bad place, or maybe they want to breathe fire and shoot lightning like this, because again, they're in a bad place, they've been treated bad, life's unfair. Don't reciprocate with negativity. If anything, give them positivity. Try to shoulder that burden. Take some of their guilt, some of their bad vibes, and deflect it some other way, not back at them. Deflect it towards the universe, and show them by example of exactly what a positive interaction can be. So, lastly, I want to thank Potato Launch and Sean and Andy and Alexis and Josh and Alexander. You guys, with your monthly subscriptions, it's slowly adding up, and it's significant, every single one of you, and I just want you to know that I appreciate it, and I see it, and it's not going unacknowledged. Alright, so if we can imagine our place in this vast spiraling galaxy, we're coming up. Let's try to get our bearings. Are we stardust? Absolutely, yes, we are stardust. If it weren't for generations of stars, the universe would contain nothing more than the light elements that formed in the Big Bang. Everything else, from calcium in our bones to the carbon that makes up the primary amounts of our DNA, ultimately comes from stars. Deep, deep, deeply in their cores, nuclear fusion forces the nuclei of lightweight atoms together to form heavier ones. And the heavier the star, the further this process goes. Stars like the sun actually create elements such as carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen through their actual lives, and they only scatter them across space to be coalesced into nebulae, and then rotationally spun in gravitational inside a star is thrown through the cosmos by supernovae explosions. That's you. That's what you are. I think it's something to be immensely grateful for. We don't know much, but what we do know is that we are star stuff. Now, the color of any star is actually a mixture of different wavelengths of light. Ranging from a high energy short wavelength blue to violet light emitted by the hottest materials, to lower energy, longer wavelength red and orange emitted by cooler gases. Now, white stars represent an even balance between the two. So, if you'll notice, this outer layer that we're looking at is like the photosphere. It's the visible surface of the star, where it becomes transparent and light escapes. And the temperature of the photosphere actually determines the color. Now you can see the gravitational lines swirling around. This is wrapped up by the convection zone, which is an opaque region. Energy is absorbed from below and carried up by moving masses of gas. Think about a rolling boil in a kettle of water. That's what this convection zone is. It's constantly cycling down and up and up and down and down and up, carrying energy and light and material from the center to the outer, releasing it. It's sinking, cooling, getting heavier as it gets exposed to space, sinking back towards the core, and being reinvigorated with more energy. Now at the photosphere, the gas releases its energy and cools, and then sinks back down. Sorry, I elaborated and then finished the little thing I was reading. But now if you'll notice these magnetic fields bubbling up, they're pushing out through the photosphere. When they do, that's called sunspots. And they create cooler areas that appear dark compared to the rest of the star's surface surrounding them. Okay. Sunspots can be large. They can be up to 50,000 kilometers in diameter, which is, I think, roughly the diameter of the entire Earth. They're caused by interactions in the sun's, God, look at that. Wow. In the sun's magnetic field, which aren't fully understood yet, but just started nuclear fusion at their core. And these are formed in nebula nurseries. These stars can sometimes burn red, and we call them red dwarfs. And when they're red dwarfs, that's a characteristic of a certain specific size and mass and density that burns at a much, much slower rate than a white dwarf. So slow that it can actually live for trillions of years before dissipating all of its energy and becoming a dark remnant with no more fuel to fuse. These are called black dwarfs, which are essentially all that is left after a star has burned up all its fuel. It's basically just a hard ball of floating carbon, drifting dimly, coolly, lonely, slowly through space. Now some stars are so big they're called hypergiants. Eta Carinae is one of the largest of these in our galaxy. Pistol is another one. It's a hypergiant that is so large it's 10 billion times stronger than the sun. Its radiation levels are so high it would be impossible for anything to live in its system. And it would take about 70,000 years to reach some of the closest stars to Earth. Here's one last thing to think about, guys. Next time you step outside and look up and are feeling particularly spiritual, did you know that during a clear country night you could see up to 19 trillion miles away into the sky? Yeah. Imagine how many civilizations are staring back. Alright guys, you've been awesome. I know you love this one. Usually I say I hope you did, but I know you loved this one. These visuals are too good not to enjoy. Look at Jupiter being enveloped. Wow. By the coronal mass ejection there. I'm gonna leave you guys with these visuals right now. Sleep well. Thanks for joining. And when you wake up, subscribe if you're already not. And if you are, leave a like. getting ready for bed. Just crawled into bed and my room is nice and cool. My teeth are nice and clean. And so am I. And I wanted to share with you some beautiful facts. Some of the most interesting, most amazing, inspiring, awful, maybe terrifying, maybe consoling facts about the universe that we live in. It's immense, perhaps infinitely so, and we only see a small portion. The part of it that light has been able to so far traverse. But I know you, just like me, are inspired and amazed. And let's just zone out and let's put aside any worries of the day tonight. And let's just drift into the cosmos of our mind as we think about the celestial phenomena out there. Speaking of out there, every single time you look into the night sky, you are looking back in time. The nearest star to us is four light years away. So that's 4 years into the past. Most of the universe is over 2 million years old for us. 2 million is the age we're looking at Andromeda at. So, for all we know, 1,990,000 years ago, the massive black hole at the center of Andromeda could have exploded, and we're merely waiting for that light to reach us. And in fact, using the miracle of science, the really atypical invention of science 500-600 years ago, we're able to look through the Hubble telescope billions, not just millions, but billions of years into the past. And if we look far enough back, we can actually detect the cosmic microwave background. After the Big Bang, the universe was unimaginably hot. So hot that protons, individual protons and neutrons that make up the nuclei of atoms, hadn't even cooled and coalesced. So this cosmic microwave background was from when the universe still hadn't recombined all of its subatomic particles. It was actually a hot plasma, a white, dense, hot plasma. This plasma was filled with a uniform glow. It was like a white, hot fog. universe expanded, both the plasma and the radiation filling it grew colder. When the universe grew cool enough, the protons and electrons combined to form neutral hydrogen atoms. But unlike the uncombined protons and electrons, these newly conceived atoms could not absorb the thermal radiation, and so the universe became transparent instead of an opaque fog. This is known as the time of the last scattering, and it actually appears on our old CRT television sets when it's tuned to a dead channel. Another interesting thing is astronomers have actually discovered the largest known diamond in our galaxy. It's a massive lump of crystallized diamond called BPM 37093. They named it Lucy after the Beatles song Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. It's found 50 light years away in the constellation Centaurus. It's about 25,000 miles across. So it's actually much larger than Earth. And it weighs in at 10 billion trillion carats. We spin, electrons spin, quarks spin, the sun spins, the entire solar system itself rotates around the galaxy that is spinning. But the fastest, the absolute fastest thing in the universe that spins are neutron stars. And pulsars are actually a particular type of neutron star that emits a beam of radiation which can be observed as a pulse of light as the star spins. For a long time, astronomers thought that these were actually artificial beacons, lighthouse, signposts, navigational beacons for transgalactic or interstellar aliens to organize their bearings around. But as we've begun to observe a little more in depth, we've realized that these are naturally occurring phenomena, but nonetheless, even some of our satellites orient themselves in space using these very ostentatious physical celestial phenomena. In fact, the fastest spinning of these pulsars, which has on its equator spinning at 24% of the speed of light. God, these neutron stars is they're not just spinning fast. What's crazy is that they're so dense that a spoonful of neutron star weighs 1 billion tons. 1 billion tons. And speaking of dense objects, perhaps in the future we would be able to make black holes and then slowly absorb the Hawking radiation given off from it. If we were to collapse the entire mass of our Earth down to about the size of a marble, it would collapse in on itself eventually to become a black hole. One thing that's really cool to observe if you're lucky enough to be somewhere without light pollution is that the Andromeda galaxy, the closest large comparable sized galaxy to our Milky Way, is actually 6 times larger than the moon in the night sky from our vantage point. 6 times larger than the moon, than the full moon. And it's still 2 million years away. And what are galaxies but matter formed in the local pockets of really dense gravitational fields we call stars. And when these stars explode, after they've been fusing atoms for billions of years, many times those regurgitating, those compellingly large explosions, they spark, they initiate the collapse of new nebulous clouds into flat rotating disks that eventually condense into new stars. So out of these new stars, most of the masses, these nebular systems, most of the mass is reformed into new stars, but some of them are formed into planets. And those planets, on those planets, biology like ours has formed. And because the universe initially formed the most rudimentary element, which was hydrogen and helium, both with 1 and 2 protons in their nuclei respectively, all the other matter, carbon, oxygen, iron, phosphorus, potassium, all the larger ones, everything else was created in those stellar explosions, either nova or supernova. And therefore 90% of our mass is in fact stardust, because all the elements except for hydrogen and helium are created in stars from being fused. I think that's fantastic. And the 10% of our body that isn't star stuff is the most ancient 14 billion year old elements that were first coalesced after the universe cooled enough to form these single and double proton atoms. And it's pretty it's really just majestic to imagine that there will be a time, maybe 100,000 billion years from now, like 100 trillion years from now, that our universe will be so evolved and will have used up most of its material and matter in our stellar fusions. And so right now we're actually in a very special, very unique, very creative, chaotic, yet creative point of the universe. Stars are being formed every day, and some astronomers' best estimates say that nearly 270 million stars are created every single day. Every single day. And that's why there's so many stars in our Milky Way. Our solar system itself takes about 225 million years to rotate just once around the Milky Way. In fact, the last time Earth was in its current position, dinosaurs were just beginning to roam Earth. We always try to lump a lot of the dinosaurs together because the geological timescales are so immense, so hard to fathom and differentiate 20 million from 200 million years. But in fact, the time difference between the great Tyrannosaurus Rex and the plate-backed, horn-tailed Stegosaurus is actually greater than the time difference between the Tyrannosaurus Rex and now. So these two animals never actually lived together. I think just the sheer immensity and mysteriousness of our cosmic environment, both far and near, is enough to keep us going for days. But if we turn it into ourselves, in our biology on Earth, so many just humbling, profound facts as well, such as there are more bacteria that live and work in 1 linear centimeter of your lower colon than all humans who have ever lived on Earth. In fact, it seems like by mass we're mostly bacteria, which makes you think just how dependent we are, and just how complex our biological and biochemical structures are. Some scientists have discovered or have tried to perceive what it would be like and how space-time would be warped from being right near a black hole. And it turns out that if you could look out from inside a black hole, you would be able to not only see the entire universe in one small patch of sky, but you would also see the own back of your head. You know, another interesting thing about our Earth is that its rotation is slowing at a rate approximately 17 milliseconds a century. In the length of the day for the dinosaurs was actually closer to 22 hours. But nonetheless, it's still pretty close to our modern day. And we, no doubt, have been adapted to sleep during these cycles. Here's a fact. A funny fact about time. If we had a sufficiently powerful and precise telescope to be able to look at a mirror placed not 4 light years away like our nearest star, but 22 light years away, we would be able to watch the Apollo landings on the moon in real time next year. Sorry, in 2014. That would have been 44 years after the 1969 moon landing. Current estimates regarding the number of stars in our galaxy are up to 4 billion stars and up to 50 billion planets. So if even 1% of those are in the Goldilocks zone, there's possibly over 500 million planets. 500 million planets in our galaxy alone capable of supporting life. I think that's just so, God, that's so profound. Wow. You know, given enough time, hydrogen begins to wonder where it came from and where it is going. I love that. If you really want a large perspective on yourself, you're currently on a 4.5 billion-year-old spaceship. A self-sufficient, organic, complex spaceship. You're orbiting a power source I think our consciousness was developed out of a sense, an urgency, a need to filter out extraneous information. And we are able to hyper-focus on the things that matter, like our social groups, and taking care of our families, and hunting, and then perhaps using tools, and the abstract concept of tools slowly evolved. All that's to say that we can't possibly conceive of everything in the universe, but we're doing a pretty darn good job of it so far. And I think the fact that there are 170 billion galaxies in the observable universe lends some credibility to the one of the things we can perceive is that there may very well be much more life out there. Undoubtedly, there must be other single multi-celled organisms like bacteria, but I have a feeling that there is indeed consciousness out there. I really do think so. Because the universe, as entropic as it is, gravity is counteracting the entropy and coalescing matter, joining it together. And there's very interesting things like our brains that have evolved, and they've evolved to such an extent that they're able to think about how they've evolved. And in fact, the human brain is the most complex object in the known universe, with 100 billion neurons. And between those 100 billion neurons, there is a quadrillion connections. And we still know very little about this organic supercomputer and how it operates. But we do know the human brain is the most complicated thing we've ever discovered. It gives us the power to form language and culture and consciousness and the idea of self and the ability to learn, sleep, dream about what we've learned. And during our dreams, it automatically, I suppose with the help of some of our subliminal conscious actions and decisions we make in dreams, helps us filter out and sift through and sort and organize the day's events to retain all the valuable lessons learned and information gained, and discard all the trivial, superfluous nonsense that we don't need tomorrow. And we even have an inbuilt model of gravity, which is pretty useful. Now this whole time, as far as I know, I'm gonna edit this so that you've been looking at the Voyager spacecraft record. In the Voyager spacecraft, well, there's actually two. And NASA engineers actually considered more than 10,000 possible trajectories for these spacecraft, because this is our first attempt to reach out into the unknown and try our best to put our best foot forward and extend a welcome hand to any intelligent life that may stumble across it. So the NASA engineers decided to do as many things simultaneously with this profound mission, which extended our culture to the stars, extended our culture all the way out into the galaxy. In our first attempt, the engineers needed to chart a precise course that would take the Voyager close to the planets, but not so close that the next leg of the journey was compromised. And actually, Voyager 1 was able to fly close enough to Saturn and Jupiter and still be propelled towards interstellar space. Now, in order to offer a sense of Earth's culture to any spacefarers, we at NASA included a 12-inch gold-plated audio-visual disc on the craft, dubbed the Golden Record. This disc contains a variety of content that was chosen by a committee chaired the late Carl Sagan. The disc includes photos and drawings, spoken greetings in many languages, and music, and other natural Earth sounds. For the convenience of any alien life form that discover the golden disc, NASA included a cartridge and needle for playback. However, the extraterrestrials will first have to figure out how to build a record player and a speaker. Including that technology would have added too much weight and bulk. So Anne Druyan, Carl Sagan's spouse, recalled that telling humanity's story was a sacred undertaking. She and Carl Sagan, in their group of, as she calls them, half a dozen very flawed human beings, had taken it upon themselves to represent humanity as a culture and as an aesthetic, to explain to anything that might be out there who and what we're all about. They arrived at the idea during a meeting of the American Astronomical Society in January of 1977. The Voyager probes would launch in late August, so representing the entirety of human achievement in a single recording would have had to be done quickly. So the group, as humans are wont to do, divided the labor. John Lomberg was in charge of assembling pictures of Earth. Timothy Ferris selected the music and Andrewian, the project's creative director, and later the co-writer of Cosmos, of course, oversaw the record's Sounds of Earth. Linda Salzman collected greetings from people around the world, and Sagan himself served as the liaison between them and NASA. The team set about researching, talking to historians and artists and ethnomusicologists. They reached out to political groups, documentarians. They recorded humans speaking, and among them, in perhaps the record's most iconic track, Sagan's young son sang, "Greetings from the children of planet Earth." Greetings from the children of planet Earth. The result was a time capsule that was, and still is somewhere out there in space, much more suggestive than summative. Humanity's cosmic mixtape. It's blasted from Earth in 1977 with the Voyager spacecraft. The record shares the tweetings of birds, the calls of humpback whales, and the hootings of chimpanzees. It includes Salzman's work spoken. It includes Salzman's work, spoken greetings of Earthlings rendered in 55 languages, starting with the Akkadian, spoken in Sumer about 6,000 years ago, and culminating with Wu, a modern Chinese dialect. And there's 90 minutes of music, including classical tunes from cultures around the globe. And this includes the first 2 bars of Beethoven's string quartet, which sounds like this. First 2 bars of Beethoven's string quartet number 13 in B flat. So the golden record is encased in a protective aluminum jacket, along with a cartridge and a needle. And both include symbolic instructions explaining the origin of the spacecraft and indicate how the record should be played. And ideally, the record is played at 16 2/3 revolutions per minute. The logic of all this is simple. It will be tens of thousands of years, if ever, before either Voyager can make a close approach to any planetary system that lies beyond our own. The spacecraft, as Carl Sagan puts it, will be encountered in the record player only if there are advanced spacefaring civilizations in interstellar space. So on the round circle, you can see it's actually binary code defining the proper speed. 3.6 seconds per rotation to turn the record. Each radial line stands for a 1. Each circumferential line or horizontal looking line stands for a 0. And the binary code to turn the record. And the time period associated with the fundamental transition of the hydrogen atom is 0.70 times 10 to the negative 9th seconds is expressed. And there we can see the outline of the stylus to play the record as well. And just to be clear, they included an elevation view of the cartridge, a kind of profile view. And then speaking of pulsars, as we did earlier, they actually used 14 different pulsars of known directions to triangulate, or whatever the word for 14 directions of alignment would be, our sun from them. The binary code actually defines the frequency of the pulsars. And then on the right, or the part I'm looking at, the one that looks more like a heartbeat diagram, whatever, the cardiac graph, is the general appearance of waveform of video signals found on the recording. And the binary code tells of the time scan, about 8 milliseconds. And the triangular sawtooth waveform is the scan triggering. Then the video image in the top rectangle with a little bit of lines at the left and a smaller amount at the right is the video image frame showing direction of scan. In binary code indicates time of each scan sweep. 512 vertical lines per complete picture. And if properly decoded, the first image will appear as a circle. And then lastly, the little barbell at the bottom, 2 circles connected by a line, is the diagram that illustrates the 2 lowest states of the hydrogen atom. The vertical lines with the dots indicates the spin moments of the proton and electron. The transition time from one state to the other provides the fundamental clock reference used in all the cover diagrams and decoded pictures. So that's just really very cool, very simple, pretty quite brilliant actually, that they knew they could stick with a constant. Something that's a constant across the entire universe, or at least that we have observed would be a constant in our galaxy. The fundamental time it takes for the hydrogen atom to transition from one electron configuration to the next least energetic state. So the golden record carries more than English words. They carry our culture, and they carry the transcendent aspects of human existence. The art, the beauty, the ache, the joy. They offer what we have and what we are up to, and what we are to the cosmos. to anyone who might call the same space home. Jimmy Carter's soundbite put it nicely. This is a present from a small distant world, a token of our sounds, our science, our images, our music, our thoughts, and our feelings. We are attempting to survive our time so that we may live into yours. Wow, it's beautiful to literally speak to the future. And I'm gonna leave it there. I don't think I could do any better than that. And I hope you guys are feeling nice and relaxed. I hope this really centered your sense of being and sense of self and sense of place and time and space. We are in a vast, mysterious cosmos, but we have each other and we have our history, and there's so much of it to explore and so many shelves of books to read through. As Nietzsche put it,